بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أصحاب الفخامة والمعالي رؤساء الوفود
heads of delegation, Excellency President of the African Union, Osmani Ozali, the President of the Union of the Comoros, dear friends and brother Musa Fakir Mohammed, the Chairperson of the African Union Commission, dear brother Excellency Abiy Ahmed, Prime Minister of the Federal Republic of Ethiopia, dear brother Excellency Ahmed Abul Gheid, Secretary General of the League of Arab States, dear friend President Lula da Silva, President of Brazil. My greetings from Palestine to Africa, from the people of Palestine, from the children who sleep hungry every night, from women who lost their husbands, from women who have been unjustly killed, from children who died before they could have the opportunity of life, and others who have become orphans after killing all their family members. From 28,000 martyrs, most of them are children and women, from the pains of 20,000 injured people who are still struggling for their lives, from hundreds of people whose homes have been destroyed and whose corpses are still under the rubble, from Gaza, from its cold winter, from the millions of people who are deprived of energy, food, shelter, and medication, and from people whom the world could not assist, from hundreds of Palestinians in Israeli prisons who are facing repression, the lack of sleep, torture, and maltreatment and repression. Greetings to Africa from the land of Palestine, which is facing a colonial settlement-based project followed by the terrorism of settlers. Greetings to Africa from our sacred land, from the Holy Mosque, from the churches which are desecrated by the Israeli army. We are defending, as we defend our land, our people, as you struggled against colonization in your own countries. Today, Israel is killing in revenge. It's killing for the sake of killing. After 130 days of aggression, it destroyed more than 281,000 homes. Israel wants to continue the war till the end of this year. This is accompanied by destruction so that its prime minister remains a prime minister. We should not allow him to do this. He does not listen to anyone. He does not listen to America, its historical ally, and nor from Europe or anyone. Therefore, we must talk with Israel on the basis of action, not simply on the basis of political declarations and positions. We must have a plan to put the colonial project under sanctions. The United States and some European countries have put a number of settlers under its products of Israeli settlements, and to boycott the settlements and the settlers, and to impose sanctions on this state that and to South Africa. It is with the leadership of its national leader. With against ignorance and disease, with on its behalf and on behalf of the rest of the world. South Africa now is bringing Israel to the International Court of Justice, and it has accused it of genocide against the Palestinian people in Gaza. Today, Israel is accused in front of the entire world and in front of the International Court of Justice as a criminal state. On the 19th of February, the International Court of Justice will also start hearings of 56 cases to show that the Israeli occupation is illegal. Cases to show that the Israeli occupation is illegal. All of this on the basis of a decision made by the UN General Assembly as presented by Palestine. Dear participants, yesterday Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International said that Israel was an apartheid state, a state of racial discrimination following everything that happened. Is it really acceptable to be with Israel and with Israeli policies? The African Union was right in preventing Israel from becoming an observer country in this union. The African Union was correct when it prevented the coming of Israeli representative into this meeting last year, and they were taken out of the meeting hall. Let's hear loud and clear the voice of union, as it has always been the case, by calling for an end to the killing and the aggression that is perpetrated by Israel against the Palestinian people, particularly in Gaza and today in Rafah and in the occupied territories and Al-Quds. Let your voice be heard to fight against the settlement-based colonial project that is being implemented by Israel in the Palestinian land. Let your voice be heard to call for bringing in assistance to the Palestinian people in Gaza. What is brought in today does not represent more than 8%. Let your voice be heard to oblige Israel to provide hospitals with energy and water. Let the voice of Africa and the voice of your union be loud and clear to support the Palestinian people to establish the Palestinian state and to recognize it as a state, a member state of the United Nations, because it was created 12 years ago. Ladies and gentlemen, today there are different political projects that are being considered. There is a political project led by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and we are working with them. And ideas were also brought forth by Spain and the European Union, calling for an international peace conference that will lead to a recognition of the state of Palestine. And there were also general ideas presented by the United Kingdom at a time when there was no partner in Palestine. There are also efforts in the United States, but these efforts talk about the two-state solution. We welcome all these efforts, but we also wanted to go beyond the stage of declarations and ideas to action. Ladies and gentlemen, the peace process since the Madrid conference in 1991 dates back 31 years ago. but there is a delay, and there are more settlers. The separation wall is completed. Our financial funds are frozen by Israel, and now we have a genocide war in addition to terrorism by settlers. All of this is in favor of the Israeli strategy to sabotage the two-state solution. Today, we cannot go back to negotiations that can last for another 33 years more. The world needs to recognize the state of Palestine on the basis of the borders of 1967, and this decision can be adopted by the Peace and Security Council, and by providing a time frame to end the occupation and to deal with the issues of refugees, settlements, and in this way only can we be faithful to the souls of our martyrs. It is only in this way Palestinian prisoners can become free. It is only in this way peace in the region can become possible for Palestine, for the Arab world, and for the rest of the world. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to reiterate my thanks to the African Union, and for its support to Palestine, the voice of freedom and justice. It has invited Palestine to this meeting. Long live Palestine, and long live African and Palestinian solidarity. Thank you very much for your attention.
شكرا.
Thank you, Dr. Mohammed Ibrahim Shtia, Prime Minister of the State of Palestine.
First of all, I would enjoy to say to all of you that I have already participated in a political visit and also participated in many conferences and demonstrations. And so I want to say to all of you now that I am thrilled and deeply emotioned to be participating in the 37th Summit meeting of the African Union. I also want to greet all the members, and especially our brother, Nandi, that is a brother. The Prime Minister of Ethiopia received me very warmly in his cabinet, and also would like to greet our dear Abusami and our dear President of the African Union, which I had the honor to be invited for this meeting. And I also would like to greet all presidents, all prime ministers, distinguished guests, and allow me to treat you as brothers and sisters. Usually we treat ourselves by Your Excellencies. Many times we are distant ourselves in our relationship, when actually we should get closer and build more ties. I would like to say to all of you first that it's with great joy that I come back for the 21st time to African continent. Now, once again, as the President of Brazil, to address the leaders of the African Union. I come here to reaffirm the partnership and the ties of our country and of our people with this brother continent. The African struggle has a lot in common with the challenges that we face in Brazil, the Brazilian people faces. More than half of the 200 million Brazilians recognize themselves as Afro descent. We, Africans and Brazilians, we need to design our own path in the international order that is now emerging. We need to create a new global governance capable of confronting the challenges of our time. The thesis of the minimum state are now in effect anymore. To plan agricultural development and industrial development is once again part of public policies in all quadrants of the earth. The digital and energy transitions demand incentive and guidance from the governments. Attempts to try to restore an international system based on ideological blocks do not have a ballast in reality. Multipolarity is a component that we cannot forget and welcome to the 21st century. The consolidation of the BRICS as the main space of networking of the emerging countries is undeniable advancement. Without the developing countries, it will not be possible the opening of a new cycle of world expansion that will combine growth, reduction of inequalities, and environmental conservation with the enhancement of freedoms. The global south is becoming a part that cannot be bypassed in terms of bringing a solution for the main crises that affect the planet. Crises that come from a model that concentrates wealth and that affect mainly the poorest, and amongst these, the migrants. The alternative to the scourges of the neoliberal globalization will not come from the racist extreme right and xenophobic right. Development cannot be the privilege of just a few. Only an inclusive social project will allow us to build prosperous societies that are free, democratic, and sovereign. There will be no stability, neither democracy, with hunger and unemployment. The moment is very proper to reclaim the best humanist traditions of the great leaders of the decolonization of Africa. To be humanist today implies to condemn the attacks that were perpetrated by Hamas against Israeli civilians and to demand the immediate freedom of all hostages. To be humanist also imposes equally to refuse an unproportional reaction from Israel that victimized almost 30,000 Palestinians in Gaza, the majority of them women and children, and that has provoked the forced displacement of more than 80% of the population. The solution for this crisis will only be everlasting if we move fast, advancing in the creation of a Palestine state, free and sovereign, a Palestine state that is recognized as full member of the United Nations. To have a strengthened UN, and that we should have a UN Security Council that should have a greater representation without countries that have veto powers and with permanent members from Africa and Latin America. For 2 years, the Ukraine war shows and paralyzes and exposes the UN Security Council. Besides the tragic loss of lives, we see the consequences that are felt around the world in the price of the food, stable, and fertilizers. There will be no military solution for this conflict. Now is the time for politics and diplomacy. Ladies and gentlemen, with your 1,500,000,000 inhabitants and its immense and very rich territory, Africa has tremendous possibilities for the future. Brazil wants to grow and needs to go together with Africa. The Brazilian people is restoring its political and economic sovereignty. We are adopting an ecological transformation project that will allow us to have a quality leap forward in an historic way. We are reclaiming our democracy, making it more and more a participatory democracy. With the Bolsa Família, the family stipend, and other public policies that are well succeeded, we will once again leave the map of hunger, withdrawing millions, lifting millions from poverty. To talk about inclusive education, which is the theme of this summit meeting, is to talk about the future. In the world, almost 250 million children are out of school. In Brazil, we are implementing schools in full time, besides the payment of a small savings for the students, the poor students in the secondary school, as a way to reduce school dropouts. We will enhance the number of scholarships that will be offered for the students from African students that study in our public institutions of higher education. We are willing to develop educational programs together with Africa and to promote intense exchange of professors and researchers between the two. We want to collaborate that Africa could become independent in terms of food production and providing clean energy and from renewable sources. We're talking about 400 million hectares squatted in more than 25 countries, with a great potential to make this continent a great barn for the world, making feasible policies to fight hunger and to produce alternative sources of energy, including biofuels. I would like also to extend our partnership to the healthcare area. There's a lot to learn with the sanitation strategies on both sides and the possibility for us to structure robust public systems that have a broad outreach. Let's work with the African Center for Control and Prevention of Diseases to confront tropical diseases that are neglected by the developed world. Let's have as a goal to enhance the access to medication, avoiding the repetition of the apartheid of vaccines that we saw during the COVID-19. With that, we should also take care of the health of our planet. That should also be our top priority. The imperative to protect the two largest tropical forests of the world, the Amazon tropical forest and the Congo tropical forest, and will make us important players in the climate change agenda. The international instruments existing today are not sufficient to reward in an efficient way the protection of these forests, their biodiversity, and the people that live in the forests, that take care and rely on these biomes. With the reclaiming of degraded areas, we can create a true green belt of protecting our forests from the global south. Together with our African partners, Brazil wants to develop and to build a family of satellites so that we can monitor. To move forward with all these initiatives, we will create an advanced post of cooperation together with the African Union in sectors such as agricultural research, healthcare, education, environment, science, and technology. Our diplomatic representation here in Addis Ababa will soon have employees of government agencies from Brazil, like the Brazilian Agency for Cooperation, our Brazilian Agricultural Research Company and our Brazilian Agricultural Research Company and Fiocruz Foundation for Research and Development in Agriculture and Health. All this is to see if we can recover and restore our possibility of cooperation with the African countries. The presence of the African Union as a full member of the G20 will be of great value, but it's still necessary to include other countries of this continent as full members of the G20. I discovered something very interesting. When I made a visit to many African countries in the past to try to manage to get support so that Brazil could host the Olympic Games of 2016, I discovered something that was extraordinary. That was the following: the power of the rich and the power of the poor. I discovered that the African continent, with 54 countries, had less delegates to the International Olympic Committee than countries with 6 million inhabitants only. And so it's necessary to change this, and we have to take into account that we have to gather urgently the representation of the developing countries in the multilateral fora and in the institutions that were created during Bretton Woods in 45 so that we can try to fix the world and avoid new wars. These institutions that were created a long time ago don't help us anymore. On the contrary, they strangle countries. So that's why we have common agenda to advocate for. It is unacceptable that we still have to live with more than 735 million people that are in hunger. We're creating at the G20, which Brazil chairs, a global alliance against hunger so that we can trigger a set of public policies and mobilize resources to finance these policies. Around 60 countries, many of them coming from Africa, are very close to bankruptcy and destined more resources to pay back their foreign debt than for applying the resources to education and health care. This reflects the obsolete nature of the financial institutions such as the IMF and the World Bank that many times aggravate crises that they should help to solve. It is necessary to seek solutions to like highways, railroads, hydroelectrical plants, wind farms, solar power, green hydrogen production of energy, and transmission lines. We have to follow step by step the evolution of the new technologies. Artificial intelligence cannot be the monopoly of very few countries and companies. They cannot also be the fertile terrain. For hate discourses and misinformation, besides causing unemployment and reinforcing the biases of race and gender that create more injustice and discrimination. Brazil will promote the interaction of the G20 with the high-level panel created by the Secretary General of the UN to support the discussions about the Global Digital Compact. We hope with that to contribute for an effective and multilateral governance in terms of artificial intelligence, and that will incorporate fully the interests of the that there's no global south without the African continent. To go back and restore ties and to contribute to build a new world order that is more fair and with solidarity, and allow us mainly to add up our efforts to overcome the challenge that we have ahead. And I would like to say, friends from the African continent, Brazil always looked around to the world without looking towards the African continent. Brazil, for many centuries, was governed looking towards the U.S. and Europe. Looking to Europe, and Brazil never did look to South America, that it gave its back, and even less, we looked towards the African continent. When I took the presidency, when I took office in 2003, I decided that Brazil should get in. When I took office in 2003, I decided that Brazil should get closer to the African continent, understanding what the Brazilian ambassador in those days would say. That said that Africa and Brazil had borderlines between themselves. They were only divided by a river called the Atlantic Ocean. The ocean is not a hurdle, so for us to get closer. It is a blessing from God for us. And so that's why not only I visit 20 times the African continent, and I open 19 embassies, Brazilian embassies in the African continent. I open a plant, an antiretroviral plant in Mozambique, and we brought agriculture, a technological company came to Ghana. But that's all over. Now I came back to be the president of the country, and I want to say to all of you here that I'm back, and I want to give my contribution to the African continent. Brazil doesn't have everything that we think we have. Brazil doesn't have all the money that I would enjoy for us to have. Brazil doesn't have all the scientific and technological knowledge that I would enjoy that we would have. Brazil does not have in the world the strength that it should have. But what I would like to end with my words is to say to all of you here, everything, little or a lot, that Brazil has, I want to share it with the African countries, because we have an historical indebtedness of 350 years of enslavement, and the only way to pay back this debt is through truth and with a lot of love. A great hug to all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President.